Welcome back in, everybody. Zach Gelb Show 516 is the time as we roll along on a Thursday, another day closer to Eagles and Seahawks out in Seattle. Today we're at the Parlor in Bordentown, New Jersey. Come on down, have a great time, get some drinks, and we're powered by Corona Light today as the Zach Gelb Show is at the Parlor. So Sunday, 4:25 in Seattle, big litmus test game for the Eagles. I think the Seahawks are the best team in the NFC, even though Dallas is ahead of them right now in the standings. The Seahawks put a lot more fear to me than the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm not knocking the Cowboys. The Seahawks have just been around consistently for the last few years and have been to multiple Super Bowls. So let's go out to Seattle right now, and he covers the Seahawks for KJR, and that's Curtis Crabtree, who joins us right now on the Zach Gelb Show. Curtis, appreciate a few minutes, and how are you?
I'm good. How's it going?
Well, it's going great, and I appreciate it. So I look at this Seahawks offensive line, and I got to see them up close and personal last week as I was at that thrilling Sunday night game, Patriots and Seahawks. The story I'm most impressed with is the left tackle, George Fant. Tell my listening audience a little bit about his background, and it's a bizarre one as well to be a starting left tackle in the National Football League.
Yeah, well, to break it down to its most basic level, just about anybody listening to your show right now had about as much experience playing left tackle coming into the season as George Fant did. So he was a college basketball player at Western Kentucky, played 4 years there, had been pursuing options to go overseas to play basketball when he was convinced to give football a shot as a fifth-year senior. And he barely played a year ago for Western Kentucky. He played a few snaps at tight end, a few snaps of defensive tackle, I think, and that was about it. So he went through a pro day workout where he did a whole bunch of different position work, and he interested a few different teams in a couple different positions, and he decided to sign with Seattle as a developmental undrafted rookie free agent type guy. They grew to like him really quickly. He's a great athlete, has really is a blank slate for Tom Cable to work with. They don't have to break any bad habits with him as a lineman because he's never had any. So they've been able to build him up, and now with an injury to Bradley Sowell creating an opening, he's starting NFL games and has basically become their starting left tackle, which is a pretty incredible jump from where he was about 16 months ago.
It's a fascinating story, no question. Now there's a battle for the right tackle spot. Who do you think's going to start at right tackle on Sunday?
I am not sure. Gary Gilliam has been the starter all season long, but they've opened up a competition there with Sowell now back from a knee injury. He will compete with Gilliam for that job. I don't know if they would make a change there right away, but you might see them rotate series here and there with the two of those guys and see how they handle the situation together. But I think that's an open competition. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Bradley Sowell was able to take that job from Gary Gilliam, but it's up in the air right now.
That's an offensive line struggled, of course, this year. Did play well in New England last week, but New England doesn't have the best of pass rushes in the National Football League. This is an Eagles front four that's very good. They're aggressive under Jim Schwartz. How do you think they'll fare, though, this week? Because if the Eagles, and I don't think the Eagles have a big chance to win this game. It's a tough task to go into Seattle and win. But if the Eagles want to win this game, they're going to have to find a way to just take advantage of this offensive line. How about that matchup? The front seven for the Birds, and then also this Seahawks offensive line.
Yeah, it's probably the best front that they've seen since maybe the Jets game in Week 4. And clearly probably the best matchup that George Fant has had to go against since becoming the starter. So there's a couple question marks there for sure. I don't think their offensive line is nearly as bad as some people want to make them out to be. They're a very young and inexperienced group, and they're inexperienced with each other too. So there's a learning curve there that they haven't come together with at this point. But they're getting better just about every week. They haven't actually allowed Russell Wilson to be sacked all that much despite his limited mobility for most of the season. But the Eagles front with Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox and Connor Barwin, they're going to pose some problems for Seattle to handle. It's clearly their biggest matchup advantage against Seattle. And ultimately, Seattle's not been able to run the football very well all season long. That's probably been the biggest downfall for the offensive line and the running game in whole, in its totality, because the running backs share some of that blame as well. But that's going to be the thing Seattle's going to have to try to scheme for and plan for and get around the biggest of anything else they'll see this week.
I like Prosise, though. I was able to see him when Temple played Notre Dame last year when College Game Day came to Philadelphia. And the Eagles, they do have a trouble dealing with a back that's multidimensional, that can kill you on the ground and then also out of the backfield catching the football. And C.J. Prosise can do that. What type of game do you expect for him moving forward, not only really for this week, but also the rest of the season? What kind of player do you see in C.J. Prosise?
Yeah, well, Seattle's actually had trouble with those kind of backs throughout the years, too. Darren Sproles being one of them, Danny Woodhead being another. Those type of guys can cause problems for most defenses, and I think that's what intrigues Seattle so much about Prosise is the fact that, being a receiver for most of his college career at Notre Dame, he can run the full route tree. He's not limited to certain routes that that they trust a running back with. He can do a lot of it. You saw that last week against the Patriots as well. So that's one area where they're really intrigued to see where he can come along with. And ultimately, he will probably be the starter going into this week's game as Thomas Rawls is just coming back from a hairline fracture in his fibula. Rawls is expected to play, but I would expect that Prosise will probably be the lead guy for at least this week. Now, ultimately, when they get up to full speed, it will probably be Rawls as the lead guy with Prosise as more the change of pace guy. But as for right now, you didn't see anything with Prosise a week ago that would make you shy away from using him a lot again this week.
Like you said with Wilson, has not been running the football that much this year, a lot because of the injury. But he had a flawless game last week going into New England and getting the victory. From a health standpoint, where do you think he's at this stage of the season?
Yeah, he's not 100%. He's still lacking his overall top year. He's not able to get to sixth gear and run away from defenders like he used to be able to. But he's able to have his quickness back for the most part, his ability to move within the pocket, his ability to come off boot action stuff, off play action and take deep drops. All of that stuff is there to a level sufficient enough to look like the normal Russell Wilson. It's just when he looks to scramble and run away from defenders, he doesn't quite have that ultimate burst to run away from them. But it's certainly he's able to do everything he needs to do at this point to play the position like they need him to play, and he was absolutely stellar last week against New England.
We're talking to Curtis Crabtree, who covers the Seahawks for KJR out in Seattle. Curtis, we'll move from Russell Wilson to Carson Wentz. What's been the talk in Seattle about the Eagles quarterback?
Well, I think obviously the first quarter of the season was really impressive to see how he came out of the gate because, heck, we saw it with Russell Wilson just a few years ago that, as a rookie, there is a learning curve there to have, and to start so fast is really, really quite impressive. I know he's slowed down a little bit here over the second quarter of the season, has probably taken some of those rookie lumps a little bit at this point, but as Pete Carroll said, I think it was yesterday, all the tools are there for him. There's going to be some bumps and bruises along the way trying to figure out the NFL game and get everything up to speed. But you have to like what you've seen from him, his ability he's got the arm strength you want, the demeanor you want. But he is still a rookie, and he's going to be facing one of the toughest defenses in the league this week. It should be a really good test for him to see what he can do against a group like Seattle's defense at this point.
Yeah, it's a big game for the Birds. There's no question about that. They need to find a way to split these next two games in Seattle and then home against the Packers if they want to stay alive to possibly get that sixth seed in the NFC. But really, though, with Carson Wentz, I think he's a really good quarterback. I think they have their franchise quarterback, but he doesn't have a whole lot of talent around him. These wide receivers are not good. The LOB will have no problem against these wide receivers. For me, if I look at Seattle, and I know that's how they think on most weeks, priority number one should be to take away this run game. So this Eagles offense has to throw the ball up 35 times to this weak secondary core. Where's your confidence? So we know that Seattle, they struggled a little bit against the run last week in New England. LeGarrette Blount did play well, but where's your confidence with this run-stopping abilities against what the Eagles have offensively out of the run game?
Yeah, I think Seattle's run defense is actually still pretty good. They're missing Michael Bennett in the run game because he's so adept at being able to shoot creases in the line and cause some havoc in the backfield. They're missing that aspect of it. But as a run front, they're not going to give up explosive plays in the running game by and large. It's going to be, their running struggles will be giving up gains of 5, 6, 7 here and there, but not really ever giving up the big play. And so you have to be willing to continue to just chip away at it. I think ultimately where the Eagles may have some kind of an advantage against Seattle would be the fact that at times Seattle struggled to cover backs and tight ends in the passing game. And that might be the one area where with Sproles and Brent Selleck, you can find some space and attack Seattle's defense. But because ultimately it's not like Seattle's going to put Richard Sherman on Selleck or Deshaun Shedd on Darren Sproles. You know, they're going to get matched up on the linebackers and the nickel backs and those sort of things, and there's going to be some space in Seattle's zones to try to push the ball down the field a little bit. I think that's probably the biggest area that they're going to have to try to attack if they're going to want to be able to move the football. The thing Seattle's defense does so well is they force you to go 13, 14, 15, 16 play drives and score touchdowns on them, and you have to be patient to just take what they give you, because the instant you force something down the field, they're going to make you pay for it. And, you know, that's where you have to be really disciplined against their defense to have success.
We know how good the LOB is, but I just have to imagine that Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor, they're sitting with a big smile on their face, because I just don't see how any of these receivers, they don't get separation against weaker secondaries. I just don't see how they get any separation this week, because Nelson Aguilar's not good. Dorial Green-Beckham's been a disappointment. Jordan Matthews is okay. It looks like the Seahawks have a big advantage when you get into that secondary, as they do most weeks.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single guy on the Eagles that's going to scare them from a receiver standpoint. Matthews is clearly the best option, and he's got some talent, but he's the only guy there. And if he was a second or third option, I think he'd be a really nice piece. But you know, he's having to carry the mail for them in a lot of aspects, and you know, it's just not the situation you want to have for the offense at this point. So ultimately, yeah, Seattle can match up with them man-to-man. They play a lot of cover 3 zone. They're not going to do anything exotic on that front. They are who they are. They play what they play really, really well. And, you know, I don't expect that to change much this week. There's certainly no option as a receiver that's going to worry either any of those guys on the back end of that defense.
Curtis, they're preparing for this noise, the 12th man, and we all know how raucous of an atmosphere that is on game day in Seattle. They were pumping in crowd noise in the NovaCare complex today, and you could hear it if you were standing in the parking lot. I saw that on Twitter. Can you just explain to me how loud on game day in Seattle it is? Because I've been to Seattle before. I've never been there for a game, but I know how passionate they are about their Seahawks.
Yeah, you know, we used to be able to get down there on the sidelines towards the end of games. They don't let us do that anymore. But, you know, so you'd be down there the final 3 minutes of games and close games, because Seattle plays a lot of them, where the crowd noise is extremely loud, and it's tough to talk to the person standing next to you on the sideline. And that's not even trying to communicate with a full offense. And ultimately, it's an environment that plays very, very well to what they want to do, and they ultimately lead to a lot of false starts happening because the offense just can't hear. They have to go into a silent count to try to run things efficiently, and it's just that one other extra thing you have to kind of prepare for and anticipate going into games to handle. And it allows Seattle's defensive ends, who are quite good in their own right. Now, Bennett's not playing this week, but Cliff Averill and Frank Clark both are, and they're very adept at it as well, at getting off the ball really, really quickly and getting after the quarterback. So that's where they get the biggest advantage out of it for sure.
Curtis Crabtree, I got 2 more for you before we let you run. Jimmy Graham, completely different player from last year to this year. We know he has all the talent in the world. What's the biggest difference you see in your number 2 with Jimmy Graham?
Just trust. It's just a trust with Russell Wilson more so than anything else. You know, he's a guy that's not always going to be quote unquote open. And Russell has had to learn that still means he's open a good chunk of the time. And so there's a trust level there. You know, they really emphasize taking care of the football, and if you're forcing balls into a guy over the middle of the field, that can lead to tips and picks and those sort of things. And so Russell's had to develop a level of trust that Graham's going to be there and be able to bring down those types of throws if he's able to put one out there for him. And ultimately, they've been able to do that, and it shows big time. I mean, I think he's already set the franchise record for receiving yards by a tight end in a season this year, somewhere in the neighborhood of 640, and he's still got 6 or 7 games left in the schedule to add to that total. So he's had a phenomenal year on that front. It's just a trust issue where they're on the same page now, and it's a really impressive thing to watch when he's able to do what he does with the one-handed catches and all of that.
And finally, before we let you run, I love loquacious athletes, especially as a member of the media. They're always just so fun to interview. And in Philadelphia and also in New Jersey and New York, we've had our fair share of these loquacious athletes. And you have a player with the Eagles a few years ago, Terrell Owens, and he was more of a cancer, ended up being in the locker room. And you know Richard Sherman's not that type of player, but he does talk a lot. Just describe to me what it's like to cover Richard Sherman on a daily basis, because I always get a laugh when I hear him talk.
He's one of the best guys I've ever had to cover. He's always available to chat with in the locker room, whether you're interviewing him or not. He'll talk on just about any subject and give you some kind of an answer you can use. He's a guy you can always get in touch with if you need to. So he's been one of my favorite guys to cover in the 9 seasons I've been doing this. Really smart, really funny. He gets along with just about everybody, and I think in general the national picture of him. Sometimes you only see the little sound bites of him yelling at Aaron Andrews and other things like that. But he's a really bright player, really smart athlete to chat with, and is a guy we always end up going to because he gives us such good quotes most of the time.
Yeah, to me, that whole interview with Aaron Andrews after the Michael Crabtree stop with the sorry-ass wide receiver, it does paint a different picture than what he actually is, because he's a real intelligent guy, and people do classify him in the wrong light. And I've read some of his stuff that he writes, and he is a really bright guy coming from Stanford. That's not a guy that just went to Stanford to play football. It's because he's an intelligent guy as well.
Yeah, I think back to his initial conference call when he got drafted here in 2011, talking about how he could have gone to USC, with Pete Carroll actually, but elected to go to Stanford to prove that somebody from Compton could go to Stanford and do that. And he's absolutely every bit as smart as somebody who went to Stanford. What you would think they would be. Him and Doug Baldwin both are incredibly bright players, really well-spoken athletes that have opinions on a wide range of issues. And Sherman is obviously said a lot of really profound things throughout his career and stuff that makes you think about the game in different ways. And so he's great. He's been awesome to cover throughout the years I've been here.
Curtis, before we let you run, just what type of game do you expect on Sunday? What do you think the final score is going to be?
I think it'll probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 27-16 Seattle. I think Carson Wentz and the Eagles will have trouble moving the football consistently against Seattle, and Seattle tends to hold teams to field goals even when they are able to get near the end zone. And I think Seattle's offense is just starting to hit its stride, and with getting Thomas Rawls back on offense too, the running game should start to come together a little bit more as well moving forward. So I think it seems like just about this time of year, every year, Seattle really hits its stride, and it kind of feels like they're about to do it again. So I think it's going to be a tough game for the Eagles to come in here to try to win it.
Curtis, appreciate the time. Thank you. Enjoy the game coming up on Sunday.
Yeah, no problem.